Oh, Barry, we're doing it differently. I like doing it this way sometimes. We do the intro at the end to let people know what we've been talking about.
Do you?
Yeah, I do like doing it this way sometimes. Come closer to your mic because people really need to know what you're saying.
Come on.
A bit over the top, that wasn't
Like
it, Barry? No, I personally didn't. Many people probably would have. Today's podcast, 169, it was all about the flush or to finish. That was the question. Don't expect to learn a huge amount because you'll be scratching your head at the end of this podcast. Lots of questions, lots of things to think about. We want to know what you do. Do you flush? Do you not flush? What are your questions? Listen to the podcast. When you've had a listen, send us in your messages. Thank you very much to, once again, CANNA Nutrients.
AutoPot.
Watering Systems. Let's give them their full titles.
That one, wasn't it?
SANlight LED. Come on, Barry.
Revolution Micro.
I didn't think you'd go with that one.
Yeah,
I thought you would have well gone with Airwin and can filters.
Thinking, no, don't say that. You just do another one. I'm doing Airwin.
That's all of them done.
Yeah, Airwin is like that. I'm getting that one in as well. Airwin, can filters, man.
That was a good podcast today. An hour long. Managed an hour long podcast on flushing, but we did.
Yeah.
We answered some questions. We asked the majority of questions. Me and Barry are now thicker than what we were at the beginning of the podcast. We're going to go and have a cup of tea and a cup of coffee. I'm going to leave you to enjoy podcast 169, to flush or not to flush.
We'll be with all the sponsors next week.
Oh, we will. We'll go and say hello to them all, won't we?
Dickhead.
Back in dickhead, Airwin. And we'll be, lots of busyness. It's Spanibus this week. So
we'll be good to catch up. I like it.
Good. We will see you all. Thank you very much for listening. And we will be back next week with some Barcelona interviews. See you all next week. See you all next week at the end of the podcast. Enjoy the podcast. Go and get a cup of tea. And with me, Steve, me, Barry, just listen. All right?
We're finished.
No, I finished this at the start of the podcast, Barry. This is super confusing. Coach, play the intro. Let's go.
All good? Ready to go? Turn my voice up a little bit. Oh, I've got everyone watching, the whole family.
Are you ready to go? Are you going to be in the house that I built, in the booth that I built?
I know people tune in every Sunday to listen, but even when business is good, we still manage to do the podcast. NPK.
Oh, the podcast started now.
It's alive.
Woo! Perfect. Is that a charger for the iPad or for my phone? Okay, plug it in and we'll get going.
Flushing.
Everyone also needs to tell us whether the sound on the YouTube has gone up. So we need to hear. Has it? Since Coachy's... Or did you twiddle with it? Oh, Josh twiddled with it. Good stuff. Josh has twiddled with the knob. We can hear ourselves. Ready to go, mate.
I was boring.
Are you going to liven up a little bit?
I'm alive.
Oh, you don't look it.
Me, mate.
Don't look it.
Happy.
You're in a chatty mood. Yeah. Let me just go. Tell us about flushing, Barry.
Want me to tell you about flushing?
I want you to tell me all about flushing.
Wow, fucking do it, mate. Make me go in deep.
I want you to go in something. You see, you look like...
I'm just very relaxed, mate.
Aye, what have you been doing?
Culture all day, haven't I?
You got into reverse speed.
Yeah. What's that?
A bit of cake. That's a bit of cake for...
I've had cake.
Josh and Coatsy. Oh, no, that's meant for the shop.
I'm on a diet.
Have you stolen their cake? Have they? We'll leave mine for later.
Cake.
We've all been eating cake.
They've all lit it.
Tell them about the gavel, Barry. Why have we got a gavel?
Because we mentioned it the other week about Sons of Anarchy, didn't we? Sons of Anarchy, I've got them.
Yeah.
And I can say who got us it.
Yeah, of course.
No, I don't reckon we should. Well,
people are going to be wondering.
Nutriculture Centre.
It's all part of the big story, isn't it?
Nutriculture Centre, is it? Trying to warm us up.
Warm us up. No, I actually like it. It's every time.
What do you reckon the buttering us up for, though?
So we don't go too harsh on them on the podcast, the
It's
NutriCulture
down
podcast.
to the viewers. Whether they want us to go in deep.
There's going to be a full table. We're going to be discussing NutriCulture. So the podcast,
with a big cigar, just looking at them. Yeah, I mean, you.
Well, you won't end up with a gavel at the end of it.
Called The Apprentice with his Saxton and all that.
Yeah. Get your thumb fat. Yeah. You're fired. That's him, innit?
What are we talking about today?
To finish or to flush. Are you all right there?
Just having a scratch, mate.
Just an adjustment, was it?
Just an adjustment.
Yeah, you pick up on all my adjustments. So I thought to pick up on yours.
Don't make me talk about your adjustments.
Your little adjustments.
Dial in. Come on, what are we doing?
To finish or to flush. To finish or to flush. That is the question.
Flush. It should be called finish.
Well,
but everyone just recognises it as flush.
Yeah. So,
but the correct terminology will be finish.
Okay. So there you go. For the live viewers, that's what we're on about. Finishing or flushing, with a little bit at the end about drying. If you need to dry your chilies or your herbs or tobacco is my favourite because we did a lot of growing and experimenting with tobacco back in the day, so that's what I like to talk about. And curing as well. Curing. So for your dried herbs, how do you store them to keep them in the most pristine condition for consumption? That's what you'd have. Yeah. Oh, you're going to be a weird one all day on this podcast, aren't you?
I don't know what it is, I just feel that...
I need to take a little cell out of your brain, don't I?
Yeah.
So, let's start the podcast. It's podcast 169 with myself, Steve.
Myself, Barry.
Oh, not too bad. You're getting there, aren't you?
It's just not B.
It is B. I call you B. When I shout you,
most people call me Ba.
Ba. I've shortened it even more.
What's this? Ba. How much is that? Ba. What do we do here? Ba. Cough.
You want to see him when he gets phone calls. If you have a phone, Barry, you're his worst enemy for the next 5 minutes.
You're lucky if you answer the phone to you.
Yeah. So, podcast 169, to finish or to flush. We are talking about the flushing of the plant, if that is the correct terminology.
Sure.
And we're going to go into a little bit about drying and the curing of herbs. Stop it with that smirk. Stop it with that smirk. You horrible little cretin.
It's a bit deep, wasn't it? Cretin.
I know, because you keep going.
Something my nan'd say cretin.
I know. I've got old school family, haven't I? You nitwit.
Dipshit.
Was that something your nan would say, is it? No, she's heavy. So, let's get into it. You've started it off by saying flush isn't the correct word, or you don't think it's the correct word.
I think it's just a word that everyone associates it with, don't they? Flush. It just.
I think to be honest,
I say it myself sometimes.
Yeah, flush, well, for the purpose of this podcast, lots of P's there. For the purpose of the podcast, we'll continue to use the word flush because it is
the most recognised.
The most recognised word, and in a sense, it is right.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about flushing your media, that's exactly what you're doing. You run water through the top and flush all of the excess nutrients out the bottom. Collect it in a drip tray. But then people say flushing nutrients out of your plant that you've spent building up for 6 to 8 weeks. What do you think about that, Barry?
It could be seen as flushing, couldn't it?
Do you think that happens? Do you think you've spent 4 weeks in veg piling in the nitrogen, and then you've spent 8 to 10 weeks to 12 weeks piling in all those flower and nutrients? Do you think a 1 week flush gets rid of all those nutrients?
Depends what media you're in.
No, does you get rid of the nutrients out of the plant?
No.
Now this is where people get unstuck
in the media.
Exactly. So this is where I think people come unstuck, and there's different types of growers who we're going to talk about throughout the podcast. Depending on what type of grower you are, dictates how long you should flush for, and what method you should use and when flushing. So
I don't think people come on. What did you say then?
They come unstuck because...
I don't think they come unstuck. I just don't think they're educated enough.
None of us are in your flushing. So I've spent like a good few days and all of today looking through as many articles as I could, as many YouTube videos as I could. Some of them are just well behind the times. I think they're just reiterating what they read and what they say. And some of them are moving forward. And we're going to talk about what we think is current beliefs with flushing. So flushing definitely pushes excess nutrients out of the bottom of the pot and the salt buildup. When that happens, it flushes the plants. I'm going to get into the vascular system as well. You know, all the veins that transport all the nutrients around the plant. It's called the xylem and the phloem. The motorway then, Barry. Wake up, it's the motorway, all right? It's the highway network. So you're flushing out the nutrients out the bottom of your pot, flushing out any excess salt buildup. Once you've completed that, and you should be checking your runoff, then you get a cup of the water that's runoff, and you need to be checking the EC. If it's still high, you mean you've still got excess nutrients in it. And if it's round about the EC that you put in the water at the top, then you've done well. You've flushed your nutrients. At that point, I would give it another flush with water, and then that's going to help the vascular system, the motorway network within the plant, move any excess nutrients out of its system and transpire them properly. But this is where we start to get into a little bit deeper. People think that for the best quality plants, you need to flush out nitrogen, because when there's excess nitrogen in your plant, your tomatoes, your herbs, your vegetables, your fruits, they can taste bittery. Or if you're using mineral nutrients, they can taste bittery, chemically taste to them. They're just not right. So I've been doing a little bit of research. They're just not ripe. Well done there, Barry. So people think that you're flushing out nitrogen, but out doing some reading today, you notice what happens when you flush and what happens to the plant, like physically. What do you see?
It starts going yellow.
And where does it start going yellow?
On the leaf.
At what point in the plant, top, middle, or bottom?
Usually, I find it's towards the middle and then breaks out.
Yeah, it starts like would start at the bottom if you haven't trimmed it all off, but would work from the bottom all the way to the top, and that's because nitrogen's a mobile element. When the plant needs nitrogen, it'll take it from the part of plants that doesn't need it anymore, the lowest part, and move it to where it does need it, which is your fruits. So people think that they're flushing nitrogen out the plant, and I know I've just noticed that went a bit higher as well. People think that they're flushing nitrogen out the plant, but actually the plant can move nitrogen from one area to another. So how technically correct is that? There's a lot of, in a nutshell, for the people that are listening, there's no definitive answer for flushing. It's still 50-50 on whether flushing is necessary or whether it's absolutely necessary to flush. The camp is still 50-50. That's what I found online. I've been through a lot of blogs, a lot of journals, and seeing what the growers think as well, seeing what they've been saying in all the comments. So getting rid of nitrogen, it doesn't seem to work. It's going to move nitrogen from the bottom of the plant to the top of the plant, and it's going to use it up. In the way that it could work, though, is that if you didn't flush, then there's going to be excess nitrogen. So as the flushing doesn't get rid of nitrogen, so to speak, it's just getting rid of the excess, isn't it? So we need to think differently and start using proper wording. And growers that are using one particular method, people that give advice online, people that listen to that advice don't know that grower's history. They don't tend to know whether he's an organic grower. They don't tend to know whether he's a mineral organic hybrid grower. They don't know whether he's fully mineral.
You don't know whether he's done it himself or not.
Or he's just talking about what other people have done. You don't know whether he's gone mineral and overdosed. You don't know whether he's gone mineral and just kept at a level. There's so many variables that you can't just listen to one person. So I've tried to collate as much information as possible and sort of see where we are as an industry, in my opinion. So why do we flush? What is the reason?
Is that a question?
Yeah, it had a question mark at the end.
There's loads of reasons, isn't there? To get rid of the excesses. You just need to finish your plant. Are you on about flushing with a product to finish the plant? Or are you on about
what do you flush with?
Honestly,
yeah,
I don't use a product. I just use Corporation Lemonade. Coffee lemon, just water.
Yeah,
pH water. Yeah,
GPH.
Yeah,
What's your pH to?
About 5.6, 5.7, something like that.
So there's another bone of contention for people that flush.
I've heard that there's loads of rumours that
you don't have to pH when you flush.
you don't have to pH.
It's like it's up.
But I've read loads of articles in the years saying, it's better to have your pH at 6.2 when you flush. It's better to have your pH at 5.5 when you flush. And I've heard loads. There's that much out there that it's...
So what I've read is that the opinions are when you flush with water, and we'll get into products later, but when you flush with water at pH 7, just straight out the tap, that would probably be okay. And then people that say that they pH the water, they're saying, well, when you pH your water to 5.6, you're allowing the plant to uptake the nutrients.
Yeah, that's what I've not led to believe, but isn't it? The plant doesn't have, if it's at 7, the plant's sort of got to break that down a bit then, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Is that right?
A whole host of stuff happens. So when you put in a pH 7, then some nutrients are available. If you look at that pH chart, you know, where at different pH bands it's available and it's not available. Some nutrients are available at 7, so some nutrients are going to be absorbed. And some nutrients just aren't available, or the plant's going to have to work really hard to make them available. The other thing is at 7 is what I've read a few times, that certain elements are readily absorbable, like heavy metal elements that you don't want the plant to be absorbing, whether that's true or not.
And that's at what, 7?
At 7 or above, you start getting to bands of heavy metals can be absorbed really easily. So for me, on that issue, I would, and again, it's the type of grower. So if you've been...
So would you pH?
I would.
What would you pH
And you
to?
would. I'd probably get it down to 6, a nice mid-range level. And you'd pH, and I'd recommend you to pH because I know that you're not too heavy-handed with your feeding. And I'd pH because I'm not too heavy-handed with my feeding. But some people are not going to EC. They're going to throw loads of A in, loads of B in, loads of PK, loads of boost, and just water right up to the very end. And then they're going to, if we tell them to pH when they flush, then it's going to take them weeks and weeks and weeks to get rid of that nutrient build-up in the tank. And they're essentially not flushing. They're still feeding with the build-up from the pots. So it's really, flushing is really grower-centred. You've got to take away from this. You've got to understand who you are as a grower and whether and how to flush for you as a grower.
So if you were someone who pH'd and EC'd every feed and it was blob on, so you're not overfeeding and you're feeding it, the flush or the finish time could be a lot shorter than someone who
100%.
didn't EC and pH.
100%. And I've written down as well, I might come back onto it because it's on my notes. You've got a few different growers, haven't you? You've got the pyramid growers, which I think me and you are. You take it up to a peak EC and then you start bringing it down. You're already starting your flush at week 6. Technically,
yeah.
Like, do you know where I'm getting at? You start the very big, like the plane's been up, it's done a journey. You start to come into land, yeah. So your flush doesn't have to be as long, doesn't have to be as violent, if you want to use those words. Then you've got other growers who take their EC and flowering at 1.5 to 1.8 to just keep it low. That's technically low for peak flowering.
Right.
Just keep it all the way at the end. So their flush maybe has to be a bit longer than ours, but still it's not that bad. Then you've got the other growers who just go, I'm into flower, let's put it at 1.5 for week 1. Right, I'm into flower, I've got flower on sites, boom, 2.2, 2.4, I don't know, I don't EC, bump, all the way to the very end. And they've been nailing 2.2, 2.2, 2.2 every feed without even knowing. Some of the time, they're not watering until runoff. So when they water, the plant takes up a little bit, salts build up, water evaporates, leaves a concentration of salts. Then they water again, that dilutes those salts, and the EC actually goes up to 2.4. And then, because they're not pushing it to run off, what they're putting in the pot is staying in there. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then that water evaporates or is taken up by the plant. It takes a little bit of feed. And they water again with 2.2, and it's just constantly building up the concentration of salts. If that type of grower pHs, then there's not an unlimited supply, but there's a good few weeks worth of food in there that the plant can just continue to take up and take up. So technically, you're not flushing at all. Do you know what I mean? So why do people think that we flush? To apparently improve taste, aroma, and yields. No one's done a test, to my knowledge, on a side-by-side, and not enough people have done a test side-by-side who's flushed and who haven't flushed to show conclusive data. The main reason for flushing is because people think there's a better end product, but people who don't flush will yell from the rooftops. It doesn't matter. My end product's just as good as anybody else's. We flush to signal to the plant that it's time to finish is soon. Does this not matter? Is it genetics that matter? These are questions. It's a very question podcast because there's no definitive answers. I don't want to be seen to be given answers when there's no science out there. I did at the end of all my article research, YouTube research, grow blog research, looking at all the growers I could find were saying on those blogs. Everyone had a different opinion. It was 50-50. Then I went on to Google Scholar. There was nothing. There was no articles on flushing. I don't believe commercial tomatoes or lettuce or cucumber. I don't believe that they flush. But then again, I don't know any commercial tomato growers. They may slowly bring the EC down to 0.5 and then just harvest because they've technically done a flush. Commercial tomato farmers are in Rockwool. Rockwool holds very, very little nutrients. It's called cation exchange capacity, CEC. It's got very little of that. So it doesn't hold on to nutrients. So they can afford to not flush. A little live feed and they're done. You know what I mean? When we were growing tobacco, though, the difference between ornamental crops doesn't matter. If you're an ornamental crop grower, no impact whatsoever. You follow a different rule, different guidelines. If you are a vegetable or fruit grower, you consume those videos, you consume those vegetables and fruits. So the fact that you're just eating them straight off the branch, give them a little clean, and you're eating them, taste tests, it's hard to decide. But with tobacco, there's a big process of curing and flushing nutrients out because you are combusting the tobacco. You're burning it, aren't you? So when you burn something, it has a very different reaction than when you just eat it.
With the tobacco, wasn't it, that if the chlorophyll in the plant was still like what's the right word, like highly active in there.
The chlorophyll.
That's what gave it the horrible taste.
The
chlorophyll.
Yeah. So that's where I bend towards as well. Not so much the nutrients, it's excess chlorophyll in the tobacco plant. You want to try and get rid of that. That's what the drying does a lot of. It's removing excess chlorophyll, and that's especially what the curing does. So your cigar tobacco leaf will be cured because they're after a much more flavour than just cigarettes. Do you know what I mean? So cigar tobacco will be cured a lot more, but it is absolutely to do with the chlorophyll, and that's why really we are flushing. I don't think we're not getting rid of nutrients. The plant has unlocked those nutrients, put them together in the plant, and putting a bit of water through the plant isn't going to unlock those nutrients, get rid of them. But what it will do is get rid of the chlorophyll. When there's no more excess nitrogen and phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, it's going to take it out the leaf. It's going to remove the chlorophyll, and chlorophyll doesn't burn well. So essentially flushing is to try and remove excess chlorophyll. That's where the drying period comes in. A good drying period will remove excess chlorophyll, and that's especially where curing comes in with the tobacco leaf. Even you can mess up the flush, you can mess up the drying. If you cure well, it can half override all of that and still get you out the shit. What does it do to the plants? It removes the build-up in the pots, so you should be flushing through, getting runoff, and then taking that runoff, measuring the EC and making sure you've got good runoff. Is a problem that I've been seeing recently. Pete, have you heard this thing about how much do you flush? And you've heard the 3 times the pot size.
It's just not true, that.
How are you going to do that with a 50-litre plot?
That's like 150
litres per plant. And I think where it could work is if you did 3 times the pot size over the entire duration of the flush. But even still, that's a lot of water. 150 litres for a 50-litre cloth pot. I think you've got there's rules that might work for a 10-litre pot. You could maybe get away with that. 30 litres, maybe over 30 litres each time you flush. It's still a lot of water, isn't it? 30 litres.
I think when people say that, though, they mean they'll take the plant and put it on like a pedestal or something and run
30
litres right the way through it, and it's just pissing out the bottom.
Yeah.
They're just running it through them.
If you had 10 pots...
They're not sitting it in a tray and putting 30 litres in
it. If they do, they get rid of the excess water.
Yeah.
But that's still, if you had 10 plants and in 10-litre pots, 300 litres of water. It's a lot of water.
I think that's just like what people do is all sort of one-off trick, isn't it? You know what I mean? As soon as they want to start flushing, they think to themselves, like, let's go back to a 50-litre pot. If I've got a 50-litre pot, I'll put it outside and I'll run 150 litres worth of water through it.
Water there, isn't it?
And then from then on, I'll just give it normal water.
Do you know what I've come across? And this makes sense to me. Tell me if it makes sense to you. If you've got a 50-litre pot or a 20 or a 10-litre pot, you will, and you get into the flush period, you will water with just plain. Me and you would be using pH water. Other people might just use non-pH water. We'll be watering through. Just before it starts to run off, we'll stop. And we'll let those excess salts dilute down into that water. Maybe leave it for 15 minutes, let them all dilute into the water. And then we'll take another amount of water, exactly the same, and we will then literally flush that out. So rather than just pouring water out until it runs out and leaving it, we'll water it, let them all dissolve, and then flush that dissolved water out.
That makes sense.
And then you don't have to use as much water then, and you're definitely getting rid of that build-up of salts. Collect your runoff, measure EC, and just keep doing that until you get to a point where the EC closely matches what you're putting through the top of your plant. That's where I learn quite a bit, to be honest, but I don't feel like I still understand the process of flushing. I don't understand why. Of
whether it works or not.
Yeah.
What do you mean? No, like,
I would always still do it.
As in,
I don't know the technical reasons.
Stuff like that.
Yeah. I don't know what biological process goes on inside the plant when it just has water. What nutrients are removed. So nitrogen is a mobile nutrient, but so that can take it from the bottom leaf and put it to the point where it needs it. But I might be wrong, yeah. I think potassium might not be a mobile nutrient. It's hard to remember off the top of your head, but the immobile nutrients, the ones that if you get a deficiency, it can't move them. Once they're in, they're locked. Calcium is an immobile nutrient, so once that's in the plant, it's in the cell walls, you can't move it to another part. So when you're flushing, nitrogen's going to get to where it needs to, but you're going to get deficiencies in calcium. Do you know what I mean? You get into deep science, and we need to understand what's going on inside the plant. We need to look at plant biology.
But it's also bad, I've heard, this is why they have finishing or flushing products, isn't it? Because it's also bad just to come, me and you do a pyramid.
Yeah.
So from a baby it's here, and then to an adult, and then to an old age pensioner. That's how we look at it.
Team biscuits.
But it's also bad for them people who start here as a baby and go bam right to an adult and then just carry right on. It's also bad just to come right off your food.
Yeah.
It's also bad just to do that, isn't it?
So we're pyramid
I don't think
growers.
It's bad, as in bad.
It could shock the plants.
Yeah.
So there's all this stuff about osmotic pressure. So osmosis is basically salts and water.
Yeah, but do you think doing something like that would have an impact on yield and quality? And
we're gonna talk about that and the effect of yield when you do flush. And I didn't realise how complicated flushing really was. It's like a critical part of the whole cycle, and there's a lot of things to consider when you're flushing. We've talked about what it does to the plant. How long do you flush for?
Me?
Yeah.
10 days, 2 weeks.
And that's a specific question, because that's you, Barry, in your room,
and
your plants, with your environment. So it's a bit of a...
But I'm a pyramid grower as well, so I probably wouldn't need to go that far.
You don't?
But I just do anyway, if that makes sense.
So in organics, or what was the word that I'm trying to look for? With organic growing, you don't technically need to flush because the plant is only taking nutrients as and when it needs it. So with organic growing, you don't need to flush because you're not going to be able to flush those nutrients out. In organic soil, there's a high cation exchange capacity, CEC. The soil's really good at holding on to what it wants to hold on to. A flush with water isn't going to do... It's just not going to do much. And in organics, the plant's only taking what it needed, so there's no need to flush out excess, because there shouldn't be an excess when you're growing with organics. It's one of the benefits of organics.
Josh, just check the YouTube. I've just had a message saying that it's not live on YouTube.
Yeah, it is not.
It's been going on and off.
Has it?
Yeah. It's being sorted. People watching on YouTube.
Have you got it there now? Can you see the comments?
Yeah, I can see the comments. BT are on it, Josh.
Yeah, okay.
BT are a nightmare, but I won't say that actually too loud. They might cut me off again. So, how long do you flush for organics? I'll go out on a limb and say you don't need to flush.
No.
Soil, 1 to 2 weeks. So a soil grow with soil. When I say soil, I need to be more accurate. I need to it's peat growing. and it's not soil outside, it's just soil that you get from the shops. 1 to 2 weeks, the CEC is high. You do need to flush out that nutrient. You do need to give it a little bit longer. Cocoa and earth substrates is a week to 10 days, so it doesn't hold on to that much nutrient. Once you're doing a few flushes, you can get away with it. Hydroponics, bubblers,
a week.
Really, like, technically they're saying 3 to 4 days, because once you remove the nutrients, it's pushed out the plant. Once you give it water, that's it. Nutrients are gone. Yeah. So it's up the plant. As soon as it transpires, you've moved everything around the plant. So when we were in bubblers, a week maximum. And then, but again, I put there at the bottom, it does depend on how heavy you feed. So if you've been a heavy DWC feeder and a dark green, it might be worth giving them an extra bit of flush. But it's all up to you. You, the grower, needs to decide how long you need to flush for. Some questions I've been getting as well. What are the benefits of a longer flush? I think we've already covered that. For the heavy-handed grower, highly beneficial. For the grower with less nutrient build-up, like the pyramid grower, then you could, and I say a longer flush is more beneficial than if you're a pyramid grower or a low EC grower all the way through, then your leaves are going to yellow quickly because the nutrients aren't there. Yeah? So when you get to the flowers, those leaves are going to start to yellow, and then that's unappealing. Yeah. So if you get yellow flowers around your fruits...
Before I even go into the flush period, my leaves start to yellow off a little bit.
Yeah. That's good because you're taking it to the max. And that's, I'll talk about that point now, because we always forget about stuff when I'm trying to stick to what I've written down. But let's look at that point now. Is when do you flush? Very important question. I've seen and I've heard on YouTube some people saying if you're on an 8-week flower that you start your flush at 6 weeks. Instant reaction.
No.
How much of a bad idea is that?
It's bad.
How much of a bad idea?
It's bad.
Oh, you're a bastard today, Barry. I'm not getting... You're like a stone today, aren't you? On a scale of 1 to 10, flushing at week 6 of an 8-week flower, how bad is it?
10.
10. I'll agree with you. Because your plant's not like... Your plant's still feeding. It's an 8-week flower.
And you see, this calendar grower is a load of shit.
Yeah.
It's just a load of shit. How can you buy a packet of seeds and it says, 8-week flower? There's still seeds, mate. How can you tell me that's going to flower in 8 weeks, you fucking div pot? Could be 9 weeks, could be 7 weeks.
Depending on if it is a high humidity plant, loves high humidity, and you put it in a low humidity environment. Has it been in a pure stressful environment? Has it been in a great environment? Some people stick to them like it's the gospel.
Nah, to see them people, though, they'll never achieve the maximum out of
the top quality. You know, people who decide to flush 2 weeks before the plant is finished, in inverted commas, you're never going to get to achieve. And that is where flushing can be a problem, because you'll listen to people, this is on YouTube as well, from like good companies, like saying, you start in week 6, or if you're on a 10-week flower, start in week 8. It's bad. The best way to start your flush, and this is from me, is, are you happy to harvest today? Yeah? Start your flush today. You start your flush when you'll be happy to go, you know what? I can take that down now. I'm going to chop them tomatoes and give them a wash and take them around to my granny's. That's when you could start your flush. Not when they're like still green, still ripening up, and you go, oh, I think I'm going to flush now. It's a bad idea. So best rule of thumb, if you would be happy to harvest today, then you can start your flush today. And depending on whether you're a soil, a cocoa, or a hydro grower, that dictates from then how long you flush for. I've also read that you need to be understanding of your harvest period with your plants. Some plants have got a real small window of harvest, but what I loved about the tobacco plant is that it had a big harvest window. So once it got to its point when it was telling you it was ready, it could be 10 days to 2 weeks after that. Like, not a lot was going to happen with the tobacco plant. It wasn't going to wilt and die. It wasn't going to start doing all kinds of madness. It had a nice 10 to 2 week window where anytime you harvest me now, I'm happy. As long as you dry me right and cure me right, it's all going to be okay. So look at your harvest window for your plants as well, and don't get too stressed about when to harvest or when to start flushing. You look like you had a question there.
No, I was just thinking.
You just look perplexed.
I'm just in deep thought, because there is a lot to
take in. To be honest, I didn't understand.
What I'm saying might not be right to some people, and what you're saying might be right to some people,
and
Don't
wrong
just
to
be
others.
wrong.
Like I guarantee you, people will be like, look, listening now to the podcast, going, I can't believe they've said that.
Wankers, these turn them off.
Yeah.
Pair of gobshites, these.
But I've looked. You know what I've done? I've looked at tried to look holistically, and what we say is, whatever we tell you, go and research. But on today's podcast, talking about flushing, I've gone through about 10 Google pages. I've typed every different search term you can think of. I've gone through all the companies that write blogs on flushing, and then I've been through the YouTube videos. I've been through my old articles and what I used to say, and nobody's got an accurate, real answer. You know, concrete evidence where you go, well, I did this and got this result, and then I did this and got this result at the same time with the same genetics. Some people will have, but then that's their environment with that genetic, with that type of feed. Yeah. What we need is 100 of those people to say, in my room, with my genetics, with my feed regime, when I flushed, I did get much better results. And when I didn't flush, it didn't taste as great. If we had that sort of data, then we could say one way or the other. I am leaning towards flush at the moment, though. I think the reason so many people flush, even if it doesn't work, is it feels good, doesn't it? You feel like the end of a cycle and you just having a good shower.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, at the end of a hard day.
Like at the end of a day.
Yeah. You go home, you have a good shower, and then you're ready then, aren't you?
You can still go home and just go to bed and go to sleep, and it will all be the same. But if you go home and get a shower, it's like you've had wake up feeling better.
It's psychological, isn't it? I'm giving me plants a good water in here, a good flush, and they're clean, the roots are happy.
Chemicals in it now.
Yeah. It's all good.
Mate, it's full of them.
So how much water do you flush with? We've mentioned that before. My current best method, and I haven't used this before. Basically, I'm the person that will flush until run off and then would just be happy with that. But I'm going to start this new method. Flush, saturate the media, leave it for 15 minutes, flush again, and push all that newly dissolved mineral or salts out of the soil into the drip tray. That's what I'll be doing. How do you know when flush is done? Measure runoff EC is the best way. That way you know that the media no longer contains nutrients or salts, and I would just give it one more flush after that and make sure that the plant has managed to get rid of everything. That's a rule of thumb. Second rule of thumb is when the lower leaf starts to go yellow, you know that you're nearly there, because that lower leaf wouldn't go yellow if there wasn't enough nutrients in the soil, would it? It would be feeding off the soil. So when your lower leaf starts to go yellow, then it's a good idea to start looking on harvest. Do not let it get to the point where the upper leaves start to get yellow, because on the tobacco plant, the lower leaves would naturally go yellow, and then the more yellow in leaf that you got on the plant, the less you could harvest, because once it went yellow, you'd hang it to dry, it'd go weird brown, it'd just be strange. So you'd hang it when it was still green, but not too dark green, and then drying would commence, and the curing would be a much nicer plant as well to consume. We did actually consume our tobacco. It was disgusting. We weren't that good of a tobacco grower because
you've got to be good to be one of them.
Oh, you got to be good. In barns in Sri Lanka, you've seen them barns.
Where it is.
All over the world they do tobacco crops, but you want to see the barns that they use for drying that tobacco.
Within Speak, weren't they?
Yeah.
You got to have tobacco in Speak.
And we didn't have a barn to dry it out in, but it was a good experience. I did enjoy it. What do you flush with? Water that has an acceptable pH, or you don't pH? We covered this at the beginning, didn't we?
Yeah.
You can pH. Me and Barry and people who use like a pyramid EC grow chart would pH, because there's not going to be a huge amount of nutrients to take up, and you're just being safe. If you do pH at 7, if you're a heavy-handed grower, it might just be worth just throwing water through, trying to flush out as much as possible. But also you do have to, it is worth always checking the pH, because if for some reason the pH is too high, I've read a few articles and reports where things like arsenic become more available.
Which?
Arsenic, things that are already in the water, just in micro amounts, but they become more available at higher pH levels. So heavy metals might become more available. So you don't want to be absorbing heavy metals when you're in the flush period. Water will work, but may take longer to break down the residual salts in the pot. So that's what do you flush with? I mean, you just use water, because we're not in a rush, but at the same time, this is now where it starts to get super, not complicated, but this is where you need to get in deeper there. If you use a flush product, then you will clear the salts quicker, because they will just dissolve it quicker, and you'll be flushing the plant much more easily. So if you can flush the plant quicker, then within the year, you can do more in that year. So your harvest turnaround is going to be quicker. So tomato growers, herb growers, tobacco growers, if you can get more crops down in that year because your flushing period is smaller, then it's beneficial for you, isn't it?
Yeah. But I think it's more beneficial that if you don't do your pH and you don't do your EC, it's probably wiser to use a proper flush.
100%.
Because it's going to break down that much salt what you've put in. You know what I mean? But the likes of us, they don't really.
Yeah.
This is my opinion. We don't really need it. So probably be someone out there who's saying, no, you still do need it because this, and this.
You know what the problem is? The problem is that in our industry, the hydroponics industry, people think that nutrient companies are just out to make profits. So they don't see, if you go and look at a tomato commercial, a commercial tomato factory, or cucumber or lettuce, they're not using flushing agents. If they are flushing at all, they'll just use water. So why is our hydroponics industry using flushing agents? So I can understand why people have that belief that these companies are just trying to sell extra
they do work.
Water. But they do work.
Yeah, they do work.
You can do the enzyme test with CANNA. You can do. You can physically see the difference if you use a flushing agent. Then the EC comes out the pot higher when you use something like CANNA Flush. It comes out higher the first time you flush than if you just use water, which means that it's managing to hold on to those salts, break them down, and get them out the pot quicker. So it's up to you. Grower preference. And they're not the most expensive products in the world. It doesn't cost an arm and a leg. So if you did want to give it a go,
I'd say it's definitely worth a go. If you don't pH and you don't EC, I'd say it's definitely worth using a flushing product.
Yeah.
But if you are like a bit of a pyramid grower or
a low EC
grower, grower all the way to, I'd say water is probably just acceptable.
What type of flush product? Because there's a few. CANNA Flush is good. Is it just a sole flushing product?
The most that I hear getting raved about is Ripening by GHE. GHE.
Ripen.
Because
it's a finishing product, isn't it?
It's a
signals to the plant it's near the end of its life.
Is it a finishing or a flush product?
It's a finishing product.
Is that what it says?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't
just
call
use
it
the right word or just not the most common word.
No, I think they've used the right word because it's got 0 nitrogen and it's like 6 or 7 on the PK. So I couldn't call it a flush because it's got nutrients in it.
But that's the whole thing about where it might work better for EC growers because it's also, I've heard from loads of people and I've read loads on it that it's bad to just come off your food to these people who have got a big EC, like you say, 2.2, and just come right off the food.
That's what I was talking about before, osmotic pressure, and to not get
into
the
to
science.
Then swap it and use ripening is sort of, it's babying it back down, isn't it? Yeah. Where we've babied ours down over weeks, they're just babying it down over.
With a product. And ripening's got feed in it. It's also got a signalling hormone in it to tell that the plant's at the end of its life. So if you had powdery mildew, if you had botrytis...
That actually breaks down the chlorophyll in the leaf, doesn't it?
It probably does signals to the plants that
I'm sure it does.
It's at the end, so it'll start breaking itself down to essentially produce its sexual parts to reproduce.
Right. See, we've spent all this money on feeds. We don't want to get them back out the plant, really, do we?
No, you wouldn't want to, no.
I've spent all that money on them, putting them in there. Why would I just want to flush them out in a week?
Yeah, and I think that's what people think. They're flushing the nutrients out of the actual tomato. But what you're doing is flushing the nutrients out of the vascular system. So out of that nutrient highway, the motorway, so which is a good thing because you can clear that pretty quick, but you're never going to get rid of nutrients. Once they're assimilated into the plant, they're locked in, that's it, you're finished. And then heavy feeders that then go down to water with no pH, it's a massive shock. And the reason being is because it's called osmotic pressure. So it goes from, water will move within a plant cell depending on the concentration of salts. So if you've had a high salt concentration, and that's what the plant's got used to, it's in the cells, if you then start putting water in, them salts are going to be sucked out the cell into the water, and you could end up with problems and shock to the plant, which is not great because you need the plant to have every last bit of energy. to do what it wants to do, whether that's finishing, ripening, fattening out. You want the plant to be performing its best all the way through, don't you? So that's what we flush with. Best products to use. CANNA Flush is a specific flush product. It's cheap. It breaks down salts, gets rid of them very quickly. Hydroponics Flush is a bit of a feed to come off at the end. I used to use Hydroponics Flush in bubblers, and I'd never ever got that yellow one, but it did lighten up, and it meant that the flush period could be a lot shorter. Do you know what I mean? So you'd use something like Hydroponics Flush for a few days, then just use water for a few days, and then you'd be all done in a bubbler. So it was like less than a week with a flush. And I've also put Ripen as a good plant signaler. If you've got problems or you need to get it down quickly, Ripen's a really good product from GHE. Someone said, do you have cleaner fruits, herbs, vegetables, or consumables if you flush? And that is potentially, again, it all comes down to the way you fed your plants all the way through vegging and flowering. If you've been heavy-handed,
it's hard to say cleaner, as in cleaner that it's free from chemicals or synthetics or whatever it is, or we've put them in there for a reason.
Yeah, to build the plant.
The only thing that we're flushing is the media.
Yeah, and so it's like it's all. So it's been all good.
That's what I mean, lad. There's like people like. It's like more education's needed.
Yeah, for everybody.
For everybody.
Me, you. The top people in the industry. You haven't heard one person.
No, it's like
tell me conclusively.
I've put all them nutrients in there, and now I'm going to flush them all.
It's like a mad change of attitude, isn't it, from people?
It's not something you.
It's like, I want to spend £500 on me Boost and me PK,
and then in the last 2 weeks,
I want to get rid of them all.
Yeah,
it's mad change of attitude, isn't it? And
but that's just what people have been led to believe.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean? That, you flush your plants. Well, I think flushing's the wrong word anyway.
Get rid of excess.
Yeah, I understand people say flushing, but to me, I call it finishing more than anything. I see it as a finishing.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, finishing. Flushing to some people is the right word because you're flushing the nutrients, but people think you're flushing the end product, the flowers, the fruits, the vegetables. You're not. So then, for those people, you should just say you're finishing your plant. You're not flushing it. You're not flushing the plant's products of anything. You're flushing the vascular system. You're flushing the media, and therefore you're finishing the plant. It's like what happens in nature. So I don't know what part of the cycle to start at, but you've got your fully formed tree. It's got the fruits on it, lovely green leaves. Autumn comes, and the nutrients from last year have started to be used up. They're all gone to produce the fruits. The leaves start to go yellow or purple or pink or whatever colours behind them. They fall off. They fall to the floor. They decompose. The nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium that they've got in them becomes part of the ground. It goes into winter where it's just branches. And then spring comes, extra bit of heat, extra bit of light, and it's feeding back off that stuff that it dropped from last year.
Like a cannibal.
Yeah, trees are cannibals, aren't they?
Like a cannibal.
Take that one, vegans and vegetarians.
Man. Yeah, what are you going to do about that?
Cannibals. So it's self-feeding, it's self-perpetual. When the tree outside knows that it hasn't got much nutrients left, the chlorophyll starts to go, and the plant will signal to itself, listen, if you haven't started producing what you need to produce to finish or to get your seeds ready, do so now. And that's a little bit what flushing does. You get rid of that excess nutrient, so the plant goes, there's not much left there. I haven't got enough nutrient to sustain myself. Let's finish. Let's go. This is it now.
It's like the final push.
You could potentially, and I don't know this for a fact, but it seems right. It feels good to say it, and it seems right that the plant will signal itself to say, right, we're being flushed. There's not much nutrients. We can't survive much longer. Let's put every energy we've got into the final thrust of our life. And that's probably the best thing that flushing does is signals to the plant.
I always say plants are just like us, and it's the same way of us. If we've got something wrong with us, what does our body do?
Shuts down.
What does it shut down first?
Your energy.
No, like
what do you mean if there's something wrong? Like
touch wood, if there was something badly wrong, it was critical.
Yeah.
And you had 10 minutes left.
Yeah.
And your body's fighting itself to keep you going.
And you're in a shitty mood today. Hey, fucking hell, buddy.
But what would your body do? It doesn't
shit
need
itself.
that. Yeah, it doesn't need that, so it shuts that down. Like your kidneys, it'll go.
I'm on
fuck
you.
the kidneys.
I'm on you.
I don't need them at the minute. You know what I mean? Shut down, get the energy
organ
on the heart.
failure.
It's organ failure, and slowly but surely, them organs will drop off. But they're not actually dropping off. It's your body actually shutting them down to concentrate on. Prioritising.
Brain, lungs.
Yeah. It's thinking that if my heart goes, all yous are gone anyway, so I'm gonna have to start dropping yous off slowly to keep that going, and then at the last minute, it's gone.
Just to survive.
To survive.
There's not actually anything wrong with me. You don't have to get too upset.
It's all right, mate. Give it 10 minutes. Podcast finished. A fucking big lump in that wall.
Who built it?
Me. I've left the space there for you.
Have you?
Yeah.
Good. Does flushing mean the plant releases... So this is a few questions now. Does flushing mean that the plant releases stored carbohydrates to use as energy? And is this what creates the better taste? So you've got rid of them excess minerals.
No,
plants start using its stored energies. So is the fact that it's getting rid of its excess carbohydrates because you haven't given it nutrients? These questions I don't know the answer to.
When you say better taste,
so maybe a sweeter tomato. You might find that your tomato is sweeter. Yeah, you might find that your tobacco burns better. It doesn't give a harsh taste.
But the only reason your tobacco burns better is because it's got no chlorophyll in the leaf. Yeah. That's people think if someone was doing their own tobacco and they smoked it and it tasted horrible, then they think, oh, it's chemicals. It's not chemicals at all, mate. It's nothing to do with chemicals. It's the chlorophyll in the leaf what's making it taste like that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And it's chlorophyll that doesn't burn well.
Yeah, it's chlorophyll that doesn't burn well.
Flushing can also negatively impact yields if done incorrectly. So I feel it's a good important thing to do. If you do it incorrectly, like flushing from week 6, or you panic and you think, oh, I just need to flush. At that time when the plant is giving its final push, you're just going to take away all the nutrients it needs and just give it water. It'll massively impact your yields. Yeah. And that's another thing people got to consider. Are they after yields or are they after quality, flavour, and aroma? That's another thing you need to look at when you're flushing, and what time you flush at as well.
I think there's more, like I said before, I think there's just not enough proper education out there for people to say, people can learn how to grow, anyone can learn how to grow, but you've got to learn to read your plant. Yeah. Because it might say on the pack of the seeds what you buy 8 weeks, 7 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, but that doesn't, it's like you put an oven meal in the microwave. I mean, another meal in the microwave, fucking hell, lad. Another meal in the oven.
We're using that, Coatsy.
Another meal in the oven. Yeah. And it says gas mark 6 for 30 minutes. Yeah. Do you stick to that guideline?
I'll put it in for 30 minutes, but know that I'll just peel
when
back
you
the
go,
lid.
When I know what you do, you do what I do. You go to it and you go, fuck that, lad, mate. Give that another 15 minutes, mate. I'm not eating fucking raw shit. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
It's always a little bit cold,
the same,
isn't it?
because if you've got 20 plants in a room on the start of week 8, they're not all just going to start throwing their hand in and putting the white flag up saying, yeah, we're done. Yeah, that's us, mate. It's 8 weeks today. Fuck this, we're off. That's what I mean. Yeah. Workers do that. They fucking can't wait to get out the door on a Friday. Yeah. But plants aren't like that. Yeah. So people need to learn more about the plants than growing, if that makes sense.
You need to become plant people rather than growers. Do you know what I mean?
Is that a proper word?
Plant people. I bet you there's plant people out there in tune with the world.
You know what I mean, though, don't you? People need to understand that plant
is an individual.
As if someone sticks to growing the same plant, they need to learn that plant and push that plant beyond its boundaries. Otherwise, they're never going to get the most out of that plant.
So do you know what I see a lot of?
It's calendar growing is just bad.
Use it as a very
guideline. It's a guideline.
But then
you get to week 8 and then you think to yourself, looks like it's got loads left in it. That tomato's still like half green. Yeah. What's going on here? I should be taking it down. You're going to take it down when it's half green, are you?
No, but calendar grower will, because I've done it.
But a calendar grower will.
It's done it 8 weeks.
Yeah, it's done it 8 weeks. It's ready. It's not, mate. Okay.
Yeah. I was going to say something, and you've threw me off. I was going to say, that's it. So, if you go on the forums on Facebook, and you get all the latest strains of chilies, and you get all these new strains of tomatoes and hybrid tomatoes, and they love it. They love crossing this and hybridizing that, and they love getting they love to have the newest strain. They love to what's new. How on earth can you understand your plant? Like, do you know what I mean? Like last year, everyone was growing the Dragon's Breath chili because it was the hottest chili. The year before that, everyone was growing the Carolina Reaper. The year before that, everyone was growing the Butchalokia.
Crops have they had in to understand that? Two. And so they've had 2 crops in, and they think that they know that plant in and out.
No.
It's not happening.
It takes a long time because you could do 2 perfect environments with that Butchalokia and go, oh yeah, I'm a fly and I know that. But you don't know that's extremely intolerant to cold. So as soon as the cold comes, you go, oh shit, and you fuck it up. But next time you know. And then next time you have it a bit hot, the Butchalokia can deal with heat.
But even down to EC and pH, in 2 crops you can push the boundary of pushing the EC right up as high as you can go and running it with just a nice standard mellow EC to see if it produces the same results you can go. To be honest with you, I may as well save me money on feed because the results of pushing that EC to 2.2, 2.4, because that can handle it. I get the same results back when I do it that EC. And do you know what I mean?
I do, yeah. You just got to learn to understand your plants, and people are just
there's 3 goals in
plants.
one, isn't it? You've got the level line grower, 1.5 right the way through. Then you've got the pyramid grower, and then you've got the one who just goes from a baby right up to 40 mil of A, 40 mil of B, 40 mil of boost, fuck off right the way along the line. And there's 3 goals. You haven't done them. You've done it twice, mate.
Your plant might not like the pyramid style.
No, might not. Mate.
It might just like a low.
That's why I'm saying you need to learn the plant. Every time you grow it, you need to do it differently until you come to that conclusion. Probably. How long would you say in there?
To understand your plant?
To understand that plant.
Bro, we did.
I'm saying
we did that tobacco. We were 2 years with that tobacco.
I'm saying 18 months minimum before you think, do you know what? That's done. A little bit of tweaking.
And you'll always find new things with your plants. Yeah. You'll always find new things that it can deal with high temps. So you can get away with that. Or it just does not like anything below 18 degrees. Can't deal with that. And then when it is cold, to help it. Oh, this time it went too cold, but I gave it a higher EC and it dealt with that and it was happy with it. When we had that tobacco lab for 2 years. The main strain we grew was Golden Virginia. We had loads of other strains, but we concentrated on Golden Virginia. Just after a year, we still felt like we didn't understand it. Like after a year, we were only finding out that to prevent pollination and flowering growth, you just had to constantly top. And once we found that out after a year, then we were all guns blazing. And then we had loads of stuff to find out from producing a good, healthy plant that could handle high heat or it preferred low humidity. Do you know what I mean? There's hundreds of
That's what I mean, to sustain the same amount and quality through the winter, the summer, everything. It takes a long time to learn that plant because you can say, in the summer, I know in the summer, with all my lights on, it's sitting bang on 28, but it could creep to 31s. Well, I know when I grow that plant, which is my plant, which I've had forever, that it likes to sit on an EC at 1.5. Yeah. But I know when the winter comes, I can take that EC to 2.4 and the temperatures are well lower and I'll get the same. Yeah. Because I know it. You know your plant
out. And there's all them variables that we talk about. Lighting. What lighting does your plant like? Some plants will love LED. Some plants will hate it because they need that heat. Some plants would love a ceramic metal halide. Some plants will just kick you in the balls for it. Some plants will tolerate the high EC and will give you the extra. Some plants will kick you in the nuts if you take anything over 1.8. Just get leaf burn and all kinds. There's just so many factors of growing and then so many factors. And that's all to do with your genetics of your plants. You need to understand the genetics. And too many people in the tomato, and I don't know too many people in the tobacco industry, but the tomato growers on Facebook, the chili growers on Facebook, they're just every year on a different strain.
Yeah, and it's like, wow.
You're like, you haven't even understood. Yeah, all right, let's give you the benefits of the doubt and say 1 year you've done it 4 times. You're probably only just starting to learn it, and then you're moving on to another.
And then chili growers probably do get good results But are they getting the most?
The best results.
Are they getting the best and the most out of it?
They're too concerned with what's going on in the chili street, what's the newest strain, what's the hottest chili that they can grow, rather than thinking, I'm going to let them be them fuckos that don't really understand.
Because they're always going to be chasing that new thing.
Yeah, and I'm going to concentrate on my plant. I'm doing my Butchalokia or my Red Devil or whatever it is that they're growing. I'm going to do that to the best. You know, when all these new strains fade away and people come back to a core, then you're in the lead because you understand your plant properly. And if you had 3 or 4 strains, your Butchalokia, your Red Devil, your Trinidad Tobago, and your Carolina Reaper, if you had 4 core strains that you'd spend 4 years getting to learn, 4 or 5 years, then you're at more of an advantage than a grower that has done all kinds. You know what I mean? The last point I've written down there is a grower's flushing too early and sacrificing yields. Yeah, if you flush too early, you will 100% sacrifice your yield. And then I've put at the end there, some say in an 8-week flower you start flushing at week 6. That's bullshit, in my opinion. You need to let your plant go with nutrients all the way to the end. When it's ready to harvest, then you'll start flushing.
When's the end?
The end
is when
your plant tells you it's the end. And there's a few things that you need to look out for. You know the best way. So
it's hard. I think it's hard to do a podcast on this.
Very hard.
You can educate people a little bit in like.
I hope what this podcast has done is made people think.
Me.
Do you know what I mean?
Said 8 weeks on the packet, man.
Well,
said 8 weeks on packet, man.
I don't want this to be an informative podcast. I want this to make people go, "Wow, I never thought of it like that. I need to go and do some research." But the bad thing is, I've looked. There's not a huge amount of research out there. So what I need to do, it's Barcelona this week. It's Barcelona at the weekend. I'm going to go to some of the top seed breeders, and I'm going to ask their opinions. I'm going to go to some of the nutrient manufacturers and ask their opinions, because this is one area that we don't have the answers to. And if you do have the answers and you've done the test, let me know, because I'm very, very interested. So that is flushing. How long have we been on the podcast? Because I want to look at some of the questions on YouTube. Wow.
What?
1 hour, 7 minutes.
Wow.
On flushing. Shit. We don't have chat some shit, don't we?
Bollocks.
Drying.
And I don't even feel like I've helped anyone.
I know. We've just asked questions.
We could have just come on and went like that. Yeah, this is an informative message. You need to learn your plant mate and then come back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Fucking hell. We know less now than we did at the start of the podcast. Flushing leads to drying and harvesting. Very crucial part of the process. Temperatures and ideal humidity for drying.
Me?
Yeah.
Humidity around between the 40 and 50, and the temperature between 18 and 21.
18 and 21. Airflow in the room?
A little bit. Just a slight bit.
Okay. The growing the tobacco, we used to strip a lot of the leaf down when we hung it. But speaking to a few people today, from that facility where they used to grow the tobacco, they've said they've started just hanging the plant whole, allowing the leaf to just fully cover everything. They don't strip anything off, and when as it is drying, it seems to keep essentially it's the nicotine that's the oil I was producing. They've found that it gives them higher nicotine levels, or it's not. They haven't.
Is that just because they're not manhandling it?
I think that's exactly what it is.
When it's wet.
So when they take off that outer leaf, and then you've got the bit that you want to dry and leave, then any wind hitting it is going to be damaging the oil production. So this is what they found out. They've been chopping it, hanging it whole with every bit on it, and then letting the sort of that out like an outer protection. Yeah. And I always thought that would lead to a bit of humidity or mold issues, but it does. It makes a little bit of sense, doesn't it? If you've got a humidity that's below 50%, a nice temperature, like you were saying, 18 to 21, and good air movement, because these molds don't like good air movement, then you're not likely to get molds, and also you're protecting the valuable cargo. So that's something that the people growing tobacco have found out recently. What else? The curing is also a very important stage. A lot of people don't do it because when you've spent that long growing the tobacco, or growing your tomatoes, or not so much your tomatoes, but let's say your mint or any herbs or anything that you're going to combust, like the tobacco, if you can cure it, it gets rid of that extra chlorophyll and makes the essential oils more concentrated in, like, let's say the mint or the rosemary or the thyme, makes it more concentrated compared to the plant matter, gets rid of the extra chlorophyll, dries it out a little bit more, and essentially you end up with a much better end product. So curing is super, super important. But again, you could probably do a whole podcast on that. We've just done a whole podcast on bloody flushing.
I'm still not fucking
we're still none the wiser. I'm all flushed out. Let's see what people have been saying. Which crops need flushing? It's hard to say. Commercial tomato producers,
I don't think
they flush, but we don't know if they do the pyramid.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
We don't know. They might flush.
They don't call it flush. They just take it down, the EC right down, do an EC of 0.4 for a week, and then that's them done. Do you know what I mean? I don't know commercial tomato. I just know that they don't specifically go like there's just water. Let's flush. I know we do. We need to go and visit one, don't we? Do a video. Sam said need sealed rooms that you can try to standardise the environment so it's the same all the time, 100%. And I suppose all the same plants from clone and not seeds. That's another thing. If you're doing tests, seeds are individuals, clones are clones.
That's what I was going to, what he's just reminded. That's just reminded me of what I was going to say. If you buy a packet of seeds, they're not all, I'm going to say it in simple way, they're not all from the same mum. Them babies in that packet aren't all from that same mother. Yeah. So they're not all going to act the same, eat the same. They're not. They're just conveyor belted right in from a load of mothers, and you're getting what you get.
I'll go one step further, and that's like if you buy your packets of seeds from the B&Q or the local seed shop, they're probably not from the same mum. Some people will be saying to you, of course seeds could be from the same mum, but think about a commercial where they're producing tens of thousands of seeds, all from different mums, all just leathered in, and then they're just picking out ones. They're probably not from the same mum. But then, let's go one step further, if you produce your own seeds, then and they are from the same mum, are you the same as your brother?
No.
My brother's got red hair.
Has he?
Yeah.
Lucky.
I know. So, is your brother the same as you?
No.
Has he got his hair?
Yeah, he has.
He's got a full head of hair.
It's massive.
That was quick then, though, wasn't it, Jeff?
But we're all even from the same mothers. We're all different, and that is we are all seeds. If I chop your arm off and put it in a jiffy with some Clonex, I'm getting another baddie.
That's never going to work.
It's never going to happen because would I fuck on another baddie?
You'd never chop my arm off, mate.
That's what I know. That's the size of it. And plaster his arm, mate. So that's flushing. I want to give some words of wisdom and insight. Hey, here we go. I want to give them something to take away. What do you think? Is flushing important, or would you not bother?
Organic. I wouldn't be asked.
And for everything else?
DWC.
A short one?
Short one. Dead short.
I'd
say in DWC before you even think about flushing, I'd say just empty your tank, give your tank a clean, and then fill it up just so there's no... You'd obviously clean your tank before you filled it back. You wouldn't just drain your nutrients and fill it up. You'd want to sort of rinse the roots off and clean the barrel.
Here's one for you.
Cocoa, 10 to 14 days, and soil a week.
Any beneficial bacteria that you use and continue to use and flush, they'll help unlock nutrients that are locked up, or they will keep them locked up and take them away with you. So using beneficial bacteria throughout the flush is a good idea. There's a product that we talked about last week, like Winter Frost. You can use that through flush, and you should notice a bit of colour change. Is it not through flush?
No, it's the last week.
Is it the last week before flush? Yeah. New products, so I'm not fully up to date with it. Because that's another thing. You know why I've said that? Because I've seen someone on a forum saying,
I don't think
if you flush with that,
I don't think
you don't flush with ripen.
Don't flush with ripen.
No.
But for them people who think that the plants and our calendar growers, then what I would do is I'd probably come off my nutrients on week 6 or 7 and put ripen in it. Yeah. And then take it up to week 8 and then flush when you're ready to harvest. Yeah. That's the most important thing. Flush when you think you're ready to harvest, and you'll do well from that. But you'll never know when to flush until you don't know. Until you don't. You just got to learn your plants. Someone sent a question about ice bath flushing. We talked a little bit about it last week. Ice flushing. Yeah, can have some effects, but
after the shit I don't know about flushing, I'm not even going to flush with ice cold water anymore. I need to understand what's going on inside the plant, what it actually does, and then I can figure out whether these flush products are worth it or
ice flushing.
Yeah,
to shock the plant.
To shock the plant and to let it know that winter's coming.
That's so it
produces more colours and terpenes and
to protect itself.
Resin. Yeah, to protect itself from winter frost.
I can believe that works. I can believe that works only because I'm a big believer in what happens out there works for us, and it's got to be replicated in our grow rooms.
Yeah.
So it does happen out there, doesn't it?
Mm.
In the big wide world. So why not take it indoors?
Like we said last week as well, look to nature to see if something works in nature. Somebody said about also 36 hours of darkness before flushing tells the plant that it really is fucked and it needs to get going. But it doesn't happen in nature.
It doesn't happen in nature, mate.
So I wouldn't tend to do it until I can see someone indoors hydroponically doing it with proper science data. I wouldn't personally do it myself. And here's the last thing that I want to mention. If you are into testing, I was very fortunate because when I first started really getting into hydroponics, I was a DWC grower, and you have to be on the ball with your pH, your EC, your water temperatures, but you can also really understand what's going on in the root zone because you've got access to your roots and you can measure EC and pH constantly. So you've got a really good idea of what's going on. The reason I'm a pyramid grower, here it is because I saw that when I was giving the plant 1.8 nutrients, 1.8 EC in, let's say, week 7, I'm getting to know a certain plant, putting the nutrients in a little bit high. Then when I would come back, when the water dropped by over a quarter, let's say a third,
EC would be through
the roof.
Because the plant doesn't want it.
It doesn't want it. It's taking up water, doesn't want to feed.
Water, it's separating it.
And then, so you can understand, so if you really want to understand the plant and what it wants, I'd say you've got to do it in the DWC method because you can see day by day whether the plant's eating or whether it's drinking, and then you can make a note, make a record saying in week 7 it went up, so next time I need to do this. And then last time I did it, it was the EC was dropping, so I didn't put enough nutrients in.
Yeah.
If it stays the same as what I've put it in when it's drank half, then that's perfect. That's what it wants.
I think it's easier to do tests where if you keep your room going cool and you fill the tank up with like a 1.8 EC and you come back and the room's been running at, let's say, 24, and you come back and that EC's dropped to 0.2, you can say, wow, that plant looks well better. It's eating well more, so it likes it cooler, the room.
That's it.
I agree with you there. With the DWC, it's easier to have like controlled testing. You can see what's going on with the roof. Yeah, to understand. And
to do more testing, I'd start getting into DWC because it's a great method to grow, but you just got to be on the ball a little bit. So that's it for flushing, Barry. I think Josh is at a Scarpa. I think he might have ended the YouTube live. So for anyone listening that was watching on YouTube live, thank you very much for watching. And next week, on Friday, me and Barry are off to Barcelona. Barcelona. Barcelona.
That's enough now.
Coatsy, bit of Freddie Mercury, Barcelona for me, please. Oh, that's the gavel. That's the end. Barry, I'd say it's been a pleasure, but it was at the end. You came in a bit of a, I don't know what's gone on today. You've been asleep on the couch or something?
No, mate, it's been dead busy.
Oh, yeah, you looked it. Nice and relaxed, isn't it?
Been busy, haven't I, Coach?
Right, we're in Barcelona from Friday.
We'll be doing
live? Don't think so. Because we're going to be having too much of a fun time. Might go live on Instagram. Follow us on Instagram at NPK_hydroponics to watch live of what we get up to over there. Me and Barry are going to be doing some interviews. We're going to walk around the expo and picking out people that look interesting and asking them questions. Victims. Let's get the victims. See you all next week. It's podcast 170. Thank you very much for listening. And we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.